You can use Visual Expert to get an overall view of the dependencies between the code and the data. For that, we will generate what is called a CRUD matrix, CRUD, which stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. This means that with this matrix, you will not only see which object uses which data, but you will also see how it uses that data to read, write, etc. To do this, you can select, as I did here, multiple tables. Request to generate this CRUD matrix, which will open as a two-dimensional table where the columns represent tables and the rows represent objects that use these tables. At each intersection in each cell of the table, you can see how, for example, this object will read and update the product table. In a large application, you will often have a very large number of tables if selected, but more importantly, a very large number of objects that use these tables. Sometimes you want to focus on specific operations. For example, I would like to see only the objects that read from the product table. I can therefore apply filters here to narrow down the records and see only the relevant objects. From this overview, I can delve deeper, for example, to check how this procedure reads from the product table and where exactly in its code. And I just have to click on this letter, just as I can do with all the other letters. By clicking on this letter, I will ask Visual Expert to show me in particular this case. So here I see the procedure in question with its code here. What's interesting in this example is that there isn't just one reference reading from the product table, but actually two select statements. The first one is located at line 15, which is highlighted, and the second one a bit further down at line 44. In this case, I have an overall view of the dependencies between tables and the objects that use these tables. Then I can zoom in, I can go down to the instructions to see exactly where the references are and possibly remove them. I can also use the CRUD matrix not to see which objects use tables, but which objects use columns. For that, I can focus on a particular table, display its columns, and generate a CRUD matrix just for those columns. In this case, we will see in the result that each column of this matrix represents a column of the table, and each row represents an object that accesses these columns. And here we see how it accesses it. For example, this procedure here will update the unit price, and I can click on this letter again to zoom in, to go down to the code, and I find the procedure, the table, the column, and we will zoom in here, highlighting the update command that updates this particular column.